At 41, I had everything that people around me said should make me happy. I had a stable job that paid well, a nice house in the suburbs, a husband who never missed paying bills on time, and two children who were growing up just fine. On the surface, my life looked like one of those perfectly arranged picture frames in a furniture store. Neat, safe, and comfortable. But if you had asked me back then how I felt inside, my answer would have surprised you. I was comfortable, yes, but I was also completely disconnected from myself, from my husband, and from the life I was living. Every morning followed the same pattern. I'd wake up at 6:30, prepare breakfast, pack lunches, and make sure everyone else was ready for their day. My husband, Daniel, would grab his coffee, kiss me lightly on the cheek, and head out to work. My kids would run out the door with their backpacks slung over their shoulders. And then silence. I'd stand in my spotless kitchen, staring at the clock on the wall, wondering how another day had already started and why I felt so invisible in my own life. People think disconnection happens suddenly, like an argument, a betrayal, or a shocking discovery. But for me, it was the slowest, quietest drift. It was nights when Daniel and I sat across from each other at the dinner table, but spoke only about bills or schedules. It was weekends when my kids chose to spend time in their rooms instead of with me. It was birthdays where I smiled at the gifts I didn't really want and anniversaries where the celebrations felt more like obligations. I used to love painting when I was younger. I had brushes, canvases, and endless bursts of creativity. But when I got married and then when the kids came, that passion was stored in the attic with the old paint boxes. I told myself life was too busy, that my role now was to keep the household running, not to chase after something as unnecessary as art. That was my first mistake, silencing the part of me that made me feel alive. The second mistake was pretending everything was fine. I remember standing in front of the mirror one night, brushing my teeth, when I caught myself avoiding my own eyes. I didn't want to face the truth. I had become a ghost in my own story. A reliable wife, a dependable mom, a responsible employee, but not a woman who felt joy, love, or even true presence. The breaking point came one evening when Daniel and I went out to dinner for our anniversary. We sat across from each other at a beautiful restaurant, candles flickering between us, music playing softly in the background. And yet we were silent. I tried to think of something to say, something real, something meaningful, but nothing came. I realized I didn't even know what he was thinking anymore. And worse, I didn't know what I was feeling either. That night, lying in bed, I admitted something to myself that terrified me. I wasn't unhappy because of him, or the kids, or even my circumstances. I was unhappy because I had let myself fade into the background of my own life. I was comfortable, but comfort had become a cage. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled down the dusty box of paints from the attic. The colors were still there, waiting for me. My hands trembled as I set up the canvas in the corner of the living room, afraid Daniel or the kids would laugh, but they didn't. In fact, they barely noticed. So I painted. At first, it was awkward, messy, clumsy, but it felt like oxygen filling my lungs after years of holding my breath. As weeks passed, I began to change. I started saying no to things I didn't want to do and yes to small moments that made me feel alive. I took long walks alone, listening to the sound of the wind instead of the noise of responsibility. I joined an art class at the community center, where I met women my age who were also rediscovering themselves. For the first time in years, I laughed freely with strangers who felt more like friends than people I'd known forever. One evening, Daniel walked into the living room and saw one of my paintings leaning against the wall. He looked at it for a long time, then at me. "I didn't know you could do this," he said quietly. "I didn't know I could anymore either," I admitted. Something shifted between us after that. For the first time in a long while, he asked me about my day, not about chores or bills, but about what I was feeling. And I realized maybe I wasn't the only one who had been disconnected. He had been, too. We had both fallen into a routine of survival, forgetting that marriage wasn't just about responsibilities, but about connection. My kids noticed, too. When my daughter saw me painting, she asked if she could try. We ended up spending hours together, colors spread across the table, laughter echoing through the house. That small spark of passion reconnected me not only with myself, but with my family. Looking back, being comfortable almost cost me my sense of self. I thought comfort meant happiness, but it was just numbness. Disconnection doesn't scream, it whispers. And if you don't pay attention, it will steal years of your life. Now, at 41, I don't claim to have it all figured out. There are still days when I feel overwhelmed or lost. But there's one thing I know for sure. I will never silence myself again. I will never trade passion for predictability. And I will never let comfort become an excuse for disconnection. Because life is too short to be lived halfway.